Hi. So welcome to part 2 of my health journey. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I invite you to do so. Because in it, I really laid out how I got to this place where my health descended to a space of, I don't want this doesn't work for me anymore. And then I made a fundamental decision to change my health and to change the trajectory. And I think that that's important because it'll give you access possibly to be able to evaluate your own place and whether or not you're really at a place where you're ready to make a change. A lot of people kind of window shop the idea of making change because they see it happening around them, maybe to a friend or a family member, or they see something on social media, or they just, in that moment in the day, I don't want to feel this anymore, so I'm going to make a change. And I promise you, if your orientation is just to get away from something, whatever you choose to do, unless you have the ability to actually change the stinking thinking going on and move from an orientation of get away from and lose and avoid and, delete from your life, in moving to a different orientation of being pulled by and being attracted to and wanting to create, a creative state, we call it. Unless you're in a mechanism and a structure that allows you to do that and you have the support to be able to do that, I promise you, whatever change you make will be temporary. It'll be just like a diet. And what do we know about diets? And here's something that I've learned along the way. For example, people say diets don't work. Respectfully, I disagree. The end of that sentence is missing. Diets don't work long term. They work while you're doing them. And then when you stop doing them, you go back to the old habits. So there you go. You can check the box that says diets don't work. They do. They work short term. They don't work long term. They work while you're doing them. They don't work when you don't do them. They are not sustainable. So in my opinion, why do something that isn't sustainable? That's the orientation that I have. So for people that want to be on a diet, off a diet, on a diet, off a diet, and they want to do that for the rest of their lives, go for it. But then they don't feel successful. And they don't ever truly create health for themselves. Why? Because all they're looking at is a number on a scale. This is what the habits of health has taught me. I don't look at numbers on a scale. I look at body composition. I look at fat versus muscle and, bone density. I look at all of my health factors. Most important of all, I look at healthy mind because, a very dear friend of mine says, and I don't know where he got it from, if it was something he coined, but, I totally prescribe to that notion, and that is that on a healthy body rests a healthy mind. And what's interesting is with a healthy mind comes a healthy body. The two go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other, at least not for very long. You might be able to do so for a little while. You might be able to get away with it, but not for long term. Not sustainable for the rest of your life. So, moving on to part 2. I started to really master over a period of 2 years the basics of the foundations of the habits of health. And it made such a difference for me. And the reason I know that is because I subsequently went through at least 3 things that could be considered major crises in my life. And I navigated them without any disturbance to my actual physical health. Had this happened to me prior, I don't think I would have navigated as well, because I see and I come across people all the time that I end up helping and who use crises and adversity as a reason and an excuse not to take care of themselves because they just don't know how and they don't have that fortitude. Well, I'm in that place where I'm bulletproof, mentally and physically, from ever allowing any crisis to take hold of me to such an extent that it's going to I'm going to start sabotaging myself. I have put those practices in place, and that's the only way I could have done that is had I been a part of this program. There's no way otherwise. So to go from an orientation of, getting away from to an orientation of being pulled to and having a vision that I'm working towards has made all the difference in the world. And this is what I work with people on and what I really want to invite you to think about. What were those 3 crises? Well, in 2010, I lost my dad. He passed away from multiple myeloma. It was arguably next to the birth of my youngest son, who was born premature. Definitely one of the most difficult times I've ever navigated. I don't know if I'll ever truly be over it, but I'm to the point now where the sadness doesn't overwhelm me. And I'm so grateful for, for having had my dad and for him being the man that he was. And I'm grateful that I still have my mom. And then in 2013, I had my oldest son was in a horrific accident, another but for the grace of God go I moment in my family. And he was hit by a car coming home while he was on his bicycle coming home from crew practice. And I literally stood in front of a neurosurgeon that night and had them tell me that, Rho, it's too dangerous to operate on your son. We're going to have to, let's just see if he survives the night. And if he makes it through into morning, we'll reevaluate at that time. Let me tell you something. I did not think I was going to get through that night. But not only did I get through that night, but I sustained fueling. I sustained hydrating. I did not manage to get any sleep that night. But the point is, I navigated my son's crisis. And thankfully, it turned out to be an absolute miracle. I will have to do a video about that some other time because it really speaks to how powerful prayer can be. And also whether I had a shift that night for the very first time. I really understood my relationship to God and Source, and how and when to turn and ask for things. And there's definitely a way to do it and a way not to do it. And I used to be the way not to do it. I used to bargain for stuff all the time, and I don't bargain anymore. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So I navigated that time, and I managed to take care of my own health and was able to show up for him in a way that I knew was very necessary for him and for his recovery. Then you fast forward to 2015, and I made a very difficult decision after he graduated from high school and went on to college that it was time for me to end my marriage. I had been working really hard and trying to make sure that we grow together, but through the various crises that we went through in life, it just created more and more distance instead of more opportunity for us to connect and bond together. And I realized at that point that there just was no recovery from the level of distance and different that we were. My orientation was for health and personal growth, and his orientation was to stay private and stay closed and not look at things that were too painful for him. And we just had very, very different views about how life should go. And I came to a place where I wanted to respect that. I've watched women go through, and men for that matter, go through periods of time like that. And I even watched my own ex-husband go through, obviously we were going through the same thing, but I got healthier and I really buckled down and took tremendous care of my personal physical health and my personal mental health and really tried to work on those things very, very hard. And I watched him sort of deteriorate into his own space, and he navigated it his own way, and he has every right to do that. But I saw how some of the choices that he made didn't really serve him. And once again, I really found a place of gratitude for how the habits of health really served me in my life. In 2017, I navigated a very difficult and very painful and very what could have been a very self-destructive moment in my life, where I had to navigate a fairly violent physical assault. And mind you, all of this is taking place while I'm trying to navigate a new relationship that means the world to me. And had I not had the power of this program and the support of the community that I had, I could never have navigated all of those things. My health and my weight, physically and mentally, managed to stay in a space where I could function. And I never lost the ability to function any of those things. And I have watched people go through very similar circumstances. And I've watched and heard stories from people who have navigated far worse than any of that. And I've also watched people who have navigated far less severe circumstances who have not been able to hold it together. And for one reason or another, what shows up for me is that the fundamental difference between myself and some of those other stories is that I had in place some tools. I had in place some very significant strategies and a structure inside of my life and a network of support that was unshakable and that helped me navigate everything without harm to myself. Has it been easy? No. Has it been worth it? Yes, tremendously. And it has been throughout those experiences that I have discovered the value of healthy mind. And so for those of you that watch me post things and that have read some of my posts, that they tend to be very uplifting and very positive and sometimes rather reflective and a little bit of poke in the bear going on, because I like to prompt people to really start to think about things. This is where, this is why, this is how. It's not because I think I know any better. And one of the reasons that I'm actually taking the time to spell a lot of this stuff out and sort of put myself out there, which is not an easy thing to do, is because of, I had one particular turning point actually. I was chatting with a high school friend of mine who turned around and said, what do you know? You're so fake and you're always positive and you're always happy and you're always this and that. And I said, where do you get that idea? And he says, well, you're always posting these motivational, inspirational type of quotes and memes. And yes, you put a lot of thought into what you write, but what gives you the right, to speak into other people's lives. And you think you're all that and all that stuff. And I knew that wasn't the space that I came from ever in terms of how I posted. But it made me really go, what would make him think that? So I asked him about it and he started to tell me, and he says, nobody knows anything about you. What makes you, why should we care about what you have to say? Because anybody can pick up a meme and, just because you have the gift of wording and language and writing, that doesn't mean that you have a space. And that's when it clicked for me. That's when I realized the value of being vulnerable and telling your story. It comes from a space of understanding that my mess is my message. It comes from a space of understanding that why people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. And they don't care to know how much you care until they know why. And why is because of what I've navigated. Why is because of what I've been through. Why is because I've seen people go through the same or more or less, and they're not in the same space that I'm in. They've either taken their health, their physical health, or their mental health, and it's just gone like this. And they have given up on living a life that could look like it was joyful and fulfilling. And they might do on the outside, but it's like this fake persona that they've got going on. And I don't have that. Do I have, ambitions that make me not want to be vulnerable and transparent? Oh, you betcha. You betcha. It's fear. It's fear of not being liked. It's fear of not being loved. It's fear of being judged. It's fear of being compared to. It's fear of being hated. It's fear of being insulted. And it's fear is what it all comes down to. And I have just reached a place where I just don't give a flying what about it at all. I do, but I don't. I'm going to do it anyway. And I could never have done this had I not been practicing the habits of health all this time. So in May, to sort of wrap this up, I stopped my cycle. And because I turned 53 in March. And when my cycle stopped, I started gaining weight. Not a lot, just like not all at one time, but just sort of suddenly, and none of my habits had changed. And I couldn't figure out what the heck is going on here. And then I realized, oh, yeah, it's my metabolism is shifting again, and I'm going to start losing muscle mass if I don't do something about it. So it's time for me to up my game. And the wonderful thing is I already know what to do. I already have a structure that I'm plugged into. And I think that's the main reason why I'm not experiencing so many of the signs of menopause that other women talk about, the whole major mood swings and the hot flashes and all of that other stuff. I'm not experiencing any of that. And I truly believe it's because I have a foundation for navigating my health, so that even though there may be symptoms somewhere in there, they're just not showing up to a point where they're disturbing me in any way, shape, or form. And I think that to the extent that I can be maybe a beacon of hope for other women to understand that if they start taking care of their health earlier at an earlier age, as I did a decade ago, that maybe, just maybe, it could navigate them through this time of life in a better way, and navigate them through crises the way that I have been going in a better way. So I'm starting to lose my train of thought because I'm not sure where to cut this off, because there's so much more I want to talk about. But I realize that I've been yakking for a little bit now, and I want to be able to pick up with some more specific tips and things like that, more focused on the physical aspect of my journey. But I wanted you to understand the story, and I wanted you to understand sort of the headspace that I've occupied around all of it. And maybe, just maybe, when you see my posts on Facebook from now on, you will understand the space that I occupy and where I come from, because I've navigated a lot of stuff. And this stuff is something that I truly believe my mess is my message. And I'm going to take time in future posts to delineate between each of those experiences and how I navigated them, because I think that there's a lot that can be gained from that. Not because I want to air my dirty laundry, so to speak, but because I think there's value. And I think that to the extent, and what I've learned from colleagues of mine, is to the extent that you have the courage to be open and to share about your process and to show your humanness and your fallibility and all of that, you can help someone else navigate moments that are very similar. And that is my greatest goal. And I do believe that because of the heart that I have for people, I do believe that that is my greatest gift. So I hope you are well. I hope you are taking good care of yourself. I hope that you manage to find pockets of joy, if not joy throughout your day. Take care, and God bless.